Hello, everyone. We're at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's call. And we're happy to welcome you to this webinar introducing a new resource that we'd like to share with you. It's entitled Strengthening State and Territory Infant Toddler Childcare Systems, Policies and Practices, a tool for advancing infant toddler childcare quality. And my name is Holly Wilter. I am one of your co-presenters today and also serve as a Region 4 Infant Toddler Specialist with the State Capacity Building Center's Infant Toddler Specialist Network. And I am delighted to also be able to welcome you today with Ms. Tricia Haley, who's going to share some words of welcome on behalf of the Office of Child Care. Thanks, Tricia.
Hi, everybody. So on behalf of the Office of the Federal Administration for Children and Families and also the Office of Child Care, I want to welcome you to the webinar and thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. I sent Holly the picture on your screen this morning in part because I forgot and it was the one on my phone, and in part because it actually fits really well. I am the person on the left, and on the right you will see my niece Lizzie, and actually we took this picture immediately after she taught me what turned out to be a very helpful lesson about how toddlers think and also their greater context. It was last summer and Lizzie was helping me get ready for her uncle and my brother's wedding, and she said to me, "Aunt Tricia, I really like your bracelet." And I said, "Well, thank you, Lizzie." She said, "Where did you get it?" And I said, "Well, I got it at Target." She said, "Oh, I really like Target." And I said, "Oh, I do too." Now, it's important to note at this part in the story that I live in Washington, D.C., Lizzie lives in Idaho Falls, and at that moment, we were both in Olympia, Washington. So I had told Lizzie, that I like Target, that I got my bracelet there, and she looked at me very suspiciously, and she said, "Well, when were you there?" And I said, "Well, I was there, I was doing a little quick math and was maybe a little nervous for talking to my niece, hoping that I would get it right." And I said, "Well, I was there, 2.5 weeks ago, I think." And she gave me a look, the kind of look that I would not have guessed that a person could develop before the age of 3. But she looked at me and she said, "Well, I did not see you there." And I realized that for Lizzie, at 2.5 years old, there's only one Target store. It is in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And that when Elizabeth Haley is not in that store ceases to exist. It was an excellent lesson for me in terms of the way that toddlers think. And it was actually also a really good reminder that all of us come kind of from the place where we are and the context that we have. And in OCC and in the TA team, we really try to actually think about TA that way. We know that we need to meet CCDF grantees and folks who are working on state child care systems where they are. And that's actually what I love so much about this tool. As we increasingly have options to raise the bar on infant and toddler care, we know how important it is that the tools that we're developing and using can be customized for the state and territory context that all of you are working within. And this tool is a key part of a set of resources that our Infant Toddler Specialist Network, which is part of our State Capacity Building Center, is developing to offer options to state and territory policymakers regarding infant toddler care in a way that we really haven't done before. So it is my good fortune to get the opportunity to work with the Brilliant and Exceptional Infant Toddler Specialist Network and the larger Brilliant and Exceptional State Capacity Building Center. And I now at this point have probably taken up too much of their time. So I will just thank all of you again for joining us, again on behalf of ACF and OCC, and tell you again how excited we are about this tool. And finally, I will thank the Infant Toddler Specialist Network for their wonderful, exceptional work, and I will hand it back over to Holly.
Oh, thank you so much, Tricia, and that wasn't too much time at all. I really enjoyed the story about Lizzie and the importance of looking at the world through a child's lens and a child's view, and it's very much in concert with what we're talking about today and looking at our system through a baby lens, if you will. So we really appreciate your continued championing of infant toddler childcare quality initiatives through national technical assistance and the support you provide us. And so we're glad you're here and really appreciate those warm words of welcome. Well, my friends, we're also joined today by my co-presenters, and I am going to have some time right now for Kelly and Julie and Garrett to introduce themselves.
Great, thank you, Holly. My name is Kelly Perkins, and I am the Infant Toddler Specialist in Region 3 with the State Capacity Building Center, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Hi, and I'm Julie Weatherston. I am the Infant Toddler Specialist with Region 10, and it's wonderful to be here today. I'm happy that you could all join us.
Hi, everybody. This is Garrett Westervelt. I'm also at WestEd Center for Child and Family Studies, and I'm not an infant toddler specialist. I'm the Early Childhood Policy Director for the center at WestEd, and really grateful to Holly and to Tricia and the team for pulling this together, and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly, Julie, and Garrett. And in just a little bit, Garrett's going to discuss the focus on infant toddler child care within the context of early childhood comprehensive systems. Then, as you can see from the agenda, we're going to talk about policy context, infant toddler child care, the infant toddler child care policy resource. And Kelly and Julie and I are going to provide some more information on the resource, how it was developed, how you can use it. And then we're going to take some time for your questions and comments. Just a couple of housekeeping items really quickly. Again, we have muted your phone lines so that you have the most hopefully high quality listening experience, and we encourage you to send your questions throughout the duration of our time together using that chat feature. This webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recording in addition to the resource that we're going to be sharing with you today, and we'll send you a URL where you can access the infant toddler child care policy tool, as well as a recording of the webinar. So there's lots of ways that you can find this information again after we hang up the phone today. So thank you for being on this ride with us for the next hour. So let's see who we have and which parts of the child care system you represent. We would like you to do two things. Please type in the chat box right now your name if it doesn't come up next to your phone number. And we also want you to put the state that you're with or the territory that you're with. Or if you're not specifically with a state or territory and you represent a nonprofit organization, please feel free to list that. And we also want you to respond. The second thing is to respond to this polling question. We want to know which policy levers you represent, which child care partners. We know we also have some national TA partners on the call as well, so we're really glad to see you here. And there's a nice representation of higher education and nonprofit here. So, and as you see from the resources we're going to share with you today, you're clearly representing all of the child care partners and sectors here, and each play an integral role to strengthening child care services and programs for infants and toddlers. So we're going to give you a little bit of more time to type in your name, and it's scrolling fast if you're joining us by phone. We've got folks from Colorado and Idaho and Minnesota, CNMI. Oh, great to see you all the way over there. And folks representing different regions and lots of familiar names and faces of infant and toddler champions and heroes. So great to see you on. And I don't know if we have any more voting going on, Tanisa. We also have some write-ins. If we didn't capture your child care partner or other partner, we know we have lots of other partners outside of the child care system, so please feel free to type in who you represent there as well. Hi, Virginia. Hi, Partnership Center. Okay, let's go ahead and see those results. Okay, we've got lots of professional development, lots of QRIS and quality frameworks. Some others, some of you represent all of the system partners. So glad you're on here today. And we've got some more names and and states coming in. We're really glad to have you. So thank you so much for participating in that poll for us so that we can see where you're from and which sectors you represent. So thank you very much. And as we know, it takes all of our partners to impact a system and to sustain great programs and services and efforts for infants and toddlers and their families and the workforce that supports them. And right now, I'm going to turn the floor over to Garrett, who is Garrett Westervelt, our co-presenter, to share a little bit more about the importance of focusing on infant-toddler childcare quality within our early childhood comprehensive systems works. Garrett?
Thanks so much, Holly. Thanks everybody for taking the time to be here. So I thought we would start by just taking a really quick look at what states are doing currently to support quality infant-toddler practices. And when we looked at CCDF state plans, 2016 through 2018, we get a nice summary of state and territory activities and initiatives to support infant-toddler quality. So I won't walk through all of them. You can see the numbers yourselves, but a couple things jumped out at me. One is the number of states that said that they were providing sort of the third one down, training and professional development to promote and expand child care providers' ability to provide developmentally appropriate services for infants and toddlers. And third from the bottom, developing infant-toddler components within the early learning development guidelines. So we see a focus on PD, focus on standards, and then one of the things I thought was exciting was right in the middle it says providing coaching and or technical assistance on this age group's unique needs from statewide networks of qualified infant-toddler specialists. So just as we've seen in previous years and decades, a focus on developing state capacities around specific age groups and focusing on, for example, kids with special needs. Now we're seeing states focus on creating and linking together folks within the various state systems who work on infant-toddler issues and trying to connect them to each other so they can share learning and share best practices. So we're seeing a great deal of activity around infant-toddler care and quality improvement, and I hope that this tool that Holly's and others are going to walk us through will help states and territories to think about in some detail about where what your strengths and weaknesses are and what your current capacities look like. So why do we want to think about infant-toddler care and systems in the first place? So infant-toddler care obviously takes place within and across multiple systems. And if you think about child care, Head Start, and activities and services for kids with special needs, all these systems are what we call loosely coupled systems. That is that if you pull on one end of the string, it doesn't necessarily move the other end, because these systems are through which kids are served and families are served are not tightly connected to each other. They're related and they communicate and they often share data, but they're governed differently, they're funded differently, and they often have overlapping but distinct sets of standards. And historically in the field, as many of you know, infant-toddler initiatives have kind of taken a back seat policy-wise to preschool initiatives. Preschool has had a lot of currency politically in the last 20, 30 years. Obviously, all of these different aspects of systems building ebb and flow over time for various reasons. But in recent years, we've seen a great deal of focus within states on infant-toddler. And I think that's in part because the focus on systems development overall has really deepened. Just to take one example, early learning guidelines and standards have in many states moved from being kind of a sideline to being a center point of policymaking, really focusing on what kids should know and be able to do and what those milestones look like. And as preschool systems have become more established and built out and funded, that has enabled state agencies and state and territory leaders to focus more of their energy on moving down the age group and age groups and focusing more on infants and toddlers. And frankly, the Office of Child Care and Office of Head Start have shown a great deal of leadership in this area and have really tried to focus attention on addressing birth to 5, birth to 8, and not just focusing on 4-year-olds. So I guess a question that maybe we can get into at the end of this is really how do we take advantage of these trends to better support the infant toddler workforce and to make sure that we're supporting the families, kids and their families in these complicated and not generally terribly well-connected systems. So why do we want to focus on infant toddler policy? Number one is that CCDF rules require states to assess and improve the overall quality of infant toddler care. It's a relatively recent, but more specifically articulated focus. And again, because infants and toddlers and their families are served by multiple systems, getting high quality services out there and making sure that they're available and accessible to folks doesn't happen by accident. It really requires some intentional focus and the ability of state and territory leaders and their nonprofit and philanthropic partners and others to really think and act across systems and to make sure that when you think about something like developmental screening, that there are appropriate linkages and communication happening with the healthcare system. And as we focus on early childhood mental health, for example, that there are appropriate relationships and data sharing and things like that going on across these various service delivery systems. And the other thing is, kind of self-evident, but we wanted to put it out there that as everyone knows, providing high-quality infant toddler care costs more. The ratios are different, the requirements are different, and that anytime anything gets more expensive, the politics change and it gets more challenging often. So we really need to think creatively about how do we support caregivers and providers and those who work with families so that we're doing the best we can with the resources, the limited resources that we have. And then finally, I would just say that depending on, it was nice to see all of the diverse roles and positions that people occupy from the folks that are on this webinar, but where you stand and what you see and what you think the priorities are often depends on where you sit. So if you're a QRIS administrator, you might think that one of the most important policy levers would be to make sure that we're measuring some of these milestones and indicators that we're going to talk about in this tool as part of a QRIS. Licensing folks may think that licensing is an underutilized tool in addressing infant toddler quality. CCR&Rs want to look out for and make sure that they've got a role at the table. So it's important to engage all of the different players in thinking about infant toddler policy and services because they are served by so many different actors in the system. So we're really making a great deal of progress. It is, of course, slow and complicated. And we really think it's important to take an honest look at where you are. What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And many of the people on this call have as an area of responsibility making sure that the right mix of technical assistance and other supports are available to you. And so this policy tool is really intended and Julie and Holly and Kelly are going to walk through it, to take a real honest look at where you are and to help you articulate and determine and prioritize what help you may need. Infant toddler policy is not just about care. It's also about, because infants and toddlers are so closely embedded in the family systems that they live in, serving infants and toddlers better may also support family engagement and family functioning, and also support family child care. So it's an important policy area to focus on, and it's complicated with multiple actors and multiple systems. And we hope that this tool is a way to help you sort it all out. So with that, I will turn it back to Holly. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Garrett, for providing that really critical context for enhancing our child care system efforts in ways that strengthen the quality and experiences infants and toddlers and their families receive. We wanted to make sure that when we share this tool that although it is taking a bird's eye view of infant toddler child care systems, that it very much keeps in mind the system of systems that infants and toddlers and their families exist in. So we appreciate you sharing some progress and updates and just being on with us today, Garrett, as a partner. Thank you. So we're going to dive right in to the resource now in this next section, and we want to share with you the purpose of this resource. And you may be thinking, why another assessment tool? Why another scan? Why a resource? Well, the goal of this tool is to support infant and toddler child care system leaders, identify the use of your strategies and practices that can really strengthen your infant toddler child care services and programs, and to aid you as well as your infant toddler quality leaders in making decisions that are data informed regarding the quality initiatives that you commit to, regarding your implementation strategies, so that you can have a real target based on data when working to improve the quality and supply of infant and toddler child care services and programs. And if you're online with us, you can see that one of the very basic questions that we hope that this tool can answer in whole and in part is, how is my state and territory working to strengthen the quality and supply of child care services and programs for infants and toddlers and families? What are we doing well? Where are some opportunities that we can enhance our system even more? And again, wondering about how this resource came to be, why another resource? Well, last spring and summer, the BUILD Initiative and the State Capacity Building Center Infant Toddler Specialist Network were supporting a PLF, I'm not going to use acronyms right now, a peer learning forum. And during that peer learning forum, the question was posed by the group members as to whether or not there was a scan or an assessment specific to infant and toddler child care system policies that need to be in place to support infants and toddlers and their families in quality settings. Was there something that just targeted, what they need to have as a baseline? So from this ask, the impact that ask had on the Office of Child Care was really deep. And the Office of Child Care asked for us to develop a resource to support states and territories in being able to figure out if their policies and practices hit this mark. Knowing that there were lots of, resources that assess systems building and assess the different ovals of our system, but really taking a real micro look at a macro level system. So the office asked us that we identify, they had some specific asks in this resource development. They wanted us to specifically look at the policy levers of change, which are you, the child care system partner stakeholders. They wanted us to look at critical infant toddler program practices, and the frame that we used as a optional frame for that is the program for infant toddler, essential program practices. They asked could it be user-friendly, and include strategies and practices with the biggest impact on quality. So if you're going to invest in policies and practices and adoption or implementation, what will give you that greatest quality return on investment if you were going to tackle something? So after synthesizing almost 15 scans and assessments and inventories and over 700 infant, toddler, child care related indicators, recommendations, practices, policies, based on these drivers that Office of Child Care tasked us to look at, we drafted a resource that was ready for peer review. And I even see some of you here today who are a part of that extensive CQI process, which included the Build Infant Toddler Peer Learning Group who asked for this kind of tool in the first place, our friends at the 0 to 3 Policy Center who have a great extensive infant toddler policy scan looking at the entire early childhood comprehensive system, Child Care Development Fund state administrators, many of you on the call today, the Office of Child Care and Office of Head Start National TA Centers, and various state and territory leaders who volunteered their reflections and suggestions for improvement along the way. And we know in the spirit of CQI, there's always room for tweaking to make something work better. And so based on the experience that you have with this resource, we know that the next iteration will reflect the value of your voice and experience that you have using it. And so we look ahead in the spirit of CQI to figuring out how we can make it better in its next iteration. But first we want you to use it if it's a good fit. So when you see the specific focus areas of this resource and consider other tools and assessment that address a broader system scope, you might think, well, why are we narrowing our focus when all of our work with our state advisory councils and our early childhood comprehensive systems have been to work really hard for that big level system for children and families, that no wrong door. And that micro specific level of infant toddler child care system is a very intentional scope of this tool design. We want to be able to see with as much clarity as possible if we're operating a child care system in its absolute prime operating mode, and if this system is worthy of the precious babies and toddlers and their families and the workforce that supports them that it's designed to serve. So those are the questions that we're asking. And within that, we have state and territories address not only that micro level, the middle of this bullseye here, the infant toddler child care system. We have you identify the priority level of the policies. We have you identify your relevant child care system partners, as well as external early childhood comprehensive systems building partners. And we also have you think about implementation science and what level of implementation you're currently operating in related to the strategy. So that is what we wanted to say about the tool's specific laser-like focus, if you will. And this slide talks a little bit about the tool content and organization. One of the things the Office of Child Care really tasks us with is not to have a standalone resource there where a group gets together and checks off boxes of whether they have something or not, and then they can wipe hands and say, okay, we did that. There's great celebration in completing an assignment like that or a task, but we know the value that information that's collected is only as good as the action that we take and the data, the story that data tells us. So the first part of the tool is a policies or practices or strategies inventory, if you will. And it allows you to collect data regarding the status of your current quality improvement strategies related to infants and toddlers. Completing this portion is really going to help you map out your infant toddler child care policy and practices landscape. It's not the end, like I said, yet only the beginning of understanding how you currently support infant and toddler child care quality. Hopefully you'll do some celebrating here and see some validation when you're able to say, yes, we do that, and yes, we have that, as well as identifying some opportunities that you can consider to strengthen your overall infant toddler child care system building efforts. And these indicators are organized under goal category areas that we'll discuss in a few minutes. The second part of this resource is where you're going to use the data that you collected from the inventory to inform your next steps regarding decision-making and planning priorities. And infant toddler specialists in each region are available to you to individualize the process of completing that inventory, as well as helping to support your action planning, facilitation of the process, and or strategic thought as a strategic thought partner regarding what to do with these results of this inventory. And they can help you with ideas for implementing each strategy, as well as resources that can help you achieve identified priorities. And later on this year, this hard copy format will make its way into an online format that allows states to complete the process online and save your data, chart your progress, to have measurable progress indicators, as well as operating in an auto-generated online template format for action planning that will be generated based on your identified implementation strategies and priorities. So we're really excited about that, and this is kind of the first iteration, and excited to roll out that high-tech version a little bit later. Right now, your infant toddler specialist can work with you to produce those data reports and summary of the policies inventory using an online data collection tools, and using hard or electronic copies of this resource in action planning form, whichever form or format rather is most comfortable for your state to use. And the third part of this tool is a CQI, continuous quality improvement check-in, which will also come out later this year. And this form can be used in a 3-month iteration, a 6-month time frame, or a year, whenever your stakeholder group would like to assess the implementation status of any newly adopted policies or strategies, to help you think about how to use the data that you've collected to modify your implementation approaches, again, celebrate accomplishments, and just generally reassess where you are in terms of your action planning to support really strong quality programs and services for infants and toddlers. So this next slide shows talked about the goal areas of the tool, and Office of Child Care was very strong in saying, we want to make sure that the resource reflects that states and territories can assess if infants and toddlers are being supported in the child care system, how families of infants and toddlers are being supported in the child care system, how settings are being safe and high quality, and our systems driven with a baby-based lens. How are we making sure that our child care systems are infant toddler focused? So, and also, how is the infant toddler workforce supported? A very important driver of child care quality. Oh, and these side pieces are the major themes that are covered in each of the goal areas. So you can see those there. I won't read those out to you. And here, we're just going to give you a little taste, because you're going to be able to download the resource in just a little bit. But here's a sample policy indicator in the resource. And you can see here that when a state or territory stakeholder group is going to look at this indicator, they're going to talk about who are my relevant partners. In the comments, you can mention other partners, whether it's higher education or early intervention. The priority level that you'd like this practice to be at, or that you'd like your work group or state to focus on, and then where you are in the implementation stage of that, whether you've not even started thinking about it or you're fully implementing and you just want to do a CQI check on that.
Holly, this is Kelly, and I have a question as we're looking at this, and I'm wondering if people might want to hear a little bit more about implementation stages. So thinking about if a state or a territory is looking at a particular indicator like the one that's here, what would be the distinguishing differences between implementing and fully implementing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's a great clarification, and be assured that the operational definitions of each of these terms are included in the resource. So when you're completing this, you can check back and say, oh, I want to make sure, was I implementing or in review? And implementing, we've defined as means that the child care system maybe has the policy, the required activity or strategy, and offers support. However, it doesn't apply to, or maybe it's not available across all infant toddler child care settings, or is in some way limited in implementation. So there's potential for scaling up to that full, whereas fully implementing would mean that the child care system has that policy, or the child care system partner, rather, or the whole system if it's relevant, or all partners have the policies, practices, required activities, and supports in place to implement that said effort, and that they're evidence-based, that demonstrate best practices, and that the practice or the strategy is available across all of the early childhood settings where infants and toddlers find themselves, or where families of infants and toddlers would access their services. So I hope that's a little bit helpful in determining those. Okay, thanks, Kelly, for that question.
Yes, actually, that was really helpful. Thank you, Holly. I'm also thinking about the relevant child care system partners, and I see here we have licensing and PDS, professional development systems, subsidy, quality frameworks. What if there's something else, let's say like early intervention, or another partner that would want, a state or territory may want to add to this list? Are they able to do that on this?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that although we're focusing on this, child care system under CCDF and guidelines there, that we know that we don't operate this child care system in a silo, and we wouldn't want you to. So for instance, in this indicator, we know that higher education would be a huge partner here. So while they're not particularly embedded as a lever of change or a child care partner in a child care system like licensing or professional development system subsidy or your quality framework, that they'd definitely be someone that you may include. So we'd encourage you to think about those partners as well, and we have resources certainly generated for those partners that will be helpful, but of change here is the relevant child care system partners, and please feel free to fill in other partners in the action planning and the policies inventory scan there. So thanks for that clarification as well.
Great, thank you, Holly.
Thanks, Kelly. And then this is a sample policy indicator in an action plan. This is the action plan template that's available for you that, again, we can customize, start an action plan for you based on the priority level that you recommended, the various strategies, based on your implementation stage, based on when you want to complete specific efforts, and that also generating resources, both national resources to support your efforts and state examples of folks, your friends who've done this in other states, who've successfully accomplished this. We know the best way to do what we're doing is to beg, borrow, and steal, and use what's already working, right, from our friends. And so we hope that you'll find the resources and state examples that we've compiled of these policy and strategies in action to be really helpful to you in this process.
Holly, this is Julie. I have a question for you in regards to the resources that I think others might be interested in. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how they were selected, and also just how will they be hyperlinked, and if you could just talk a little more about them.
Yeah, so we did, our development team, scanned all of the tools that were out there looking at quality indicators for infants and toddlers, and also national briefs and working papers, research. We scanned everything that was related under the sun and framed them in a resource facilitators guide that's coming out very, very soon. It'll be a nice follow-up to this webinar, so check your inboxes for that. And they were selected based on promising practices and evidence-based, and what was available online that we could see. You can see here potential state, national resources related to, we used Colorado's Early Learning and Professional Development System Plan as an example, who had really strategic action planning steps related to this indicator on implementing a workforce recruitment initiative, as well as Wisconsin developing a white paper. So we did some scrupulous research to synthesize resources that would be practical and applicable to states when thinking about wanting to embark on adopting these strategies. So they will be hyperlinked in the action planning template with the infant toddler specialist. So if you want to look at them online, they will be hyperlinked on an infant toddler resource guide as well when we'll share that URL with you later. Some of you might have already found the infant toddler resource guide, so that's great. Hopefully that answers that question.
Oh,
Thank you, Holly.
Great. Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Holly. As you were talking about the resources, I started to think about the overall purposes of this action plan. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about the way this action plan is connecting to the third section around the continuous quality improvement check, and so that the action plan, is it designed to be something that, once and done and you check it off your list, or is this something that's kind of rolling into that third section of this new tool as well?
I think you described that perfectly, Kelly. This second part of the tool really is designed to drive your CQI, your continuous quality improvement check-in process. So that form will be generated by your action plan that you develop. So it's not generated necessarily by the policies inventory tool that you complete. It requires that second part of kind of putting that data that you've collected into a manageable strategic plan that your work group wants to think about tackling to improve your system. So the CQI check will be driven by the action plan. And certainly, the next iteration of the action plan or assessment can be revised based on your CQI check, whether you decide to do that at 3 or 6 months or a year. So thanks, Al, for helping me flesh out some of those details with our group. And this time I'm going to turn the floor over to Kelly, who's going to tell us a little bit about how we can prepare to use the resource and how to determine if using this tool is a good fit with your current efforts, and any preliminary experiences of one state who's already using this tool. Kelly?
Great. Thank you, Holly. So we have been thinking about, and we have compiled some suggestions to help states and territories best utilize this resource. So on the slide in front of you, you can see that here are some things to think about as you prepare to use this tool. So first, to really think about recruiting team members that are from lots of different areas across the system, and that they have the appropriate policy, context, and knowledge to complete the tool. So even before convening this team, we really want to be thinking across the system about what data and information that you'll need. So for instance, will you need to have access to licensing regulations that talk about infant strategies and practices and toddler strategies and practices? Are there going to be other places within the system where you're going to want to start to pull together data so that when you're going through this inventory, you have everything on hand and you're able to answer whether or not your state is implementing it? Another thing that we have found that is a helpful idea as you're preparing to use this tool is in advance have some of the team members or the partners that are working on this tool with you to complete some of the sections of the inventory and of the assessment before coming together as a larger group. And one of the reasons why we found that to be helpful in some of our experiences is it lets people to kind of have a taste of what the indicators look like, to be able to think about some of it before they come together in a larger group and look to find that consensus. This is just a sample of some of the ideas that we've started to compile around preparing to use this tool. And as Holly had just mentioned previously, we have a facilitator's guide that's going to be coming out that will have a lot more to it, and we'll provide a lot of other guidance around these particular ideas for preparing to use the tool. Another thing that we need to be thinking about is whether or not it's a good fit. So, there's a lot of different kinds of tools that are out there and assessments. So let's think about whether or not this particular tool is a good fit for use in your state or territory. So here are some sample questions for consideration. Does your state or territory have the need to collect this kind of data all about the infant, toddler, child care systems practices? So for instance, is there already data that exists in your state or territory, or does data need to be updated around this particular area? Also, thinking about whether or not the kind of focus of your state or territory around this particular issue is whether or not you're interested in learning about how to strengthen that infant-toddler care system. And then also whether or not it's prioritized, whether or not this is a priority to strengthen the infant-toddler care system, especially when you're looking across the entire span of the early childhood systems planning. So these are some beginning questions to think about whether or not this tool is a good fit for you. And like I said before, there'll be more in the resource guide that's coming up. Thinking about this preparation, this facilitation, and also the implementation of this tool, we have identified some promising practices that have emerged from a pilot of this tool with Pennsylvania. And some of these promising practices that we have seen Pennsylvania employ include the idea of connecting this to a larger statewide infant-toddler strategic planning process. And really quite specifically, they utilized this tool as a needs assessment. And so they used it to map the landscape of the infant-toddler strategies and practices that were currently in use across the state and across all the different systems and partners that work with infant-toddlers and their families. And then they were also able to identify gaps or areas that can help to inform the strategic planning process. So really using this as a beginning step towards a bigger and larger plan has been something that has really helped to push this along. In addition, Pennsylvania made sure to make sure that the facilitator really had a lot of data in advance that had already been collected on infants, toddlers, and the strategies and the practices that were happening in the state at the time. And having that kind of information, especially if you have a facilitator that's helping you who's not maybe embedded within your state, having that kind of contextual information is incredibly valuable to help as a facilitator process the information with the larger group and to think about the indicators and best understand how that system is set up and how we can kind of come to consensus around each one of the indicators. And then by far, probably the most powerful practice that has come out of this pilot with Pennsylvania is the success of gathering a very diverse group of stakeholders to walk through this tool as a team. So, for instance, they were able to pull in people from subsidy, from early intervention, from early Head Start, from their licensing, from infant toddler specialists. The list kind of goes on, but they were able to pull together this diverse group of stakeholders and really think deeply and across all different kinds of parts of the system about where they were in the context of strategies to help strengthen and support infant toddler care. So these are some of the preliminary, like I had said, best practices or promising practices that we're seeing through this pilot, and more of this information will be shared in the facilitator's guide when it is published, which will be soon. So I am going to turn this over to Holly, who is going to talk a little bit more specifically about who this tool is designed for and to think about how this might be applicable to your individual state or territory as well.
Thanks so much, Kelly, sharing how we can prepare and Pennsylvania's experience, and we look forward to hearing more about Pennsylvania's lessons learned and also getting continuous improvement from them on how we can best support them in using the resource and using it for strategy change and strategy adoption that helps infants and toddlers and their families have great childcare experiences. So you, in case you're wondering still, the tool is designed for childcare system stakeholder members who, broadly put, are committed to enhancing or strengthening your state and territory-wide infant toddler childcare programs and services, and supporting the workforce that supports them, or the system that supports them. So this is a very broad definition in general. We imagine or kind of foresee infant toddler quality initiative leaders who want a data-informed action plan to target infant toddler child care policy change or policy adoption. So if you've got infant toddler leads in your state who are really wanting to think about, where do we want to grow our impact in really making experiences better for babies? Where do we target that? This resource would be great for that. It's also not exclusive to everyone who's just infant toddler who has, the baby glasses on. It's as we mentioned earlier, everyone has a role in impacting, from subsidy to professional development systems to quality frameworks and licensing and quality assurance. We know that each of these levers of change are integral to creating a well-oiled program and machine that really honors babies and creates a system that's worthy of them. So we want you to think about, we know that this will also be individualized to each of you. So this process might take part in context of a larger systems conversation that you're having, or in a different sector, or within your partner, early Head Start childcare partnerships work, or there's no wrong place, and there's really no right or wrong person that we're hoping to use this tool, but we're hoping that you think about these people when you're thinking about using this tool. And Kelly shared with you how Pennsylvania is using it, and here's just a couple of ideas that we think about for using this resource: conducting a needs assessment to inform the opportunities that your state has to use that 3% set aside to improve the quality of services that infants and toddlers receive, and really just to provide that data for informed decision making, for strategic planning and prioritizing. If you're already planning, that's great. You can use this as a litmus. If you're not planning yet, this is a great place to jump off and get baseline data for your work. And we want to reiterate here that this resource really helps answer the CCDF plan question that we have right now in our current CCDF plan format for states and territories to describe measures relevant to specific activities that they'll use to evaluate your progress in improving the quality of child care programs and services in your state and territory. That's one of the beauties of this resource, is that you're able to really measure progress from one assessment to the next, so that you can see where you've moved. So often we implement programs and efforts and don't have anything to measure our progress by, and so this one is an easy way to measure progress there. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie Weatherston, who's going to talk a little bit about now what. You've heard about the resource, its potential uses, its design. Julie, tell us about some next steps.
Okay, thanks, Holly. If you take a look on your screen, hopefully pretty soon you'll be able to see a place there'll be a link to download the entire tool, which I know that you're looking forward to. There it is. It should be magically up at the top there. And after looking over the tool in detail, we're guessing that you'll likely have some questions. And the Infant Toddler Specialist Network team is here. We are available to answer your questions and to support further discussion about using this tool in a way that's meaningful to your work. In order to help us coordinate the technical assistance that states and territories receive, we are asking that you please work with your state administrator to connect with us so that we can be more coordinated. And if you're not aware of who your infant toddler specialist is, they are listed on this slide by region, so you can see everybody's email addresses and phone numbers. Also, some states and territories are sending infant toddler representatives to the Infant Toddler School Age Child Care Conference, which is coming up May 9th and 10th in St. Louis. And this is another opportunity for us to discuss and explore the tool and to connect with the Infant Toddler Specialist Network staff who can support the process of using it. And finally, to everyone who attended the webinar, and this was kind of alluded to earlier, but we plan to send a follow-up email with a link to the facilitator's guide that we were talking about. And this is a guide that goes along with the tool that will kind of help with the process of going through step by step how to go through the tool. And this should be available or will be available later in the year. We don't have an exact date yet, but stay tuned. Those are kind of the next steps that we have. We do have a little bit of time where we can answer some questions, and I'm wondering if people are putting into, I saw some questions go into the chat box, but if people had reflections or questions that they wanted to us to address, we would like to hear those questions. We're also going to be putting together frequently asked questions, and that will be available in the near future as well. So I'm going to give you this opportunity. We're doing pretty well on time. Holly or Kelly or Garrett, do you have anything while we're waiting maybe for some questions to come in?
I had one idea that I was wondering if Holly could talk a little bit about. I'm thinking about the potential uses of the tool, Holly, and I'm wondering if states or territories were thinking about just using a small section of the tool, like if they were very focused in on collecting data around one place, like such as workforce support.
Yeah, so in your CCDF state plan or in your infant toddler quality initiative, you may be interested in a very specific area of your quality improvement efforts. And say you're just interested in honing in on a workforce. You really think that that's where you want to put your eggs in that basket this year, and the different goal areas of the tool can be used independently. So they're not mutually exclusive. You can use as many or all of them, the tool as a whole, in completing it. You can do different sections at a time. You can do portions of sections. You can narrow in as much laser-like focus on different sub-goal areas or goals as you'd like. And there still should be value in generating an action plan, and a facilitator's guide can help you or whoever's leading the process, whether it be an infant toddler lead or whether it be your infant toddler specialist or state system specialist or another facilitator that you hire to do the process. All of them can be used, and there should be value in completing any part or any part of the instrument in portion or in whole. So hopefully that's a good point. Kelly, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, Marlena has raised her hand, and Gretchen is typing. Okay, similar to the question of specific area of the tool, is there a set of topics you'd recommend to states that compile data and completed plan with the 0 to 3 tool? So that's a good question. I think that this could be a good complement to the 0 to 3 tool, the early learning domain portion of that kind of early childhood comprehensive system. What you should see is this saturated kind of exploded section. This resource is really a broader look of actually a child care system's lens within that early learning domain. So it may be nice. You'll see a lot of the similar indicators from that early learning domain portion of the 0 to 3 infant toddler policy tool, and then you'll see some additional ones as well. That 0 to 3 policy tool is super comprehensive, and you might find some more nuances within the child care system and CCDF in this resource compared to in the 0 to 3 tool. But I'm creating work for myself. It might be nice to do a little crosswalk to see which ones are, if you've completed one, which portions are similar in the other, so that states can think about that in a strategic and intentional way. Good question, Gretchen. Anyone else with a question? You're welcome. Thank you. Marlena, you have your hand raised. I know our lines are muted. Not sure if you can type in the chat box or you might be on the phone solely. We're also available, our emails, and you can respond to the meeting invite. You can press *6 to unmute yourself, Marlena, if you'd like to ask a question. *6, or anyone else can as well. You can press *6. Yeah, this, some states are involved in maybe asking the question, well, which one do I use? We are all about collecting data that informs your decision-making and action and commitment to infants and toddlers. And, we will certainly love to have a sit-down conversation to see if this resource is a good fit, or maybe the 0 to 3 policy tool, maybe a comprehensive early childhood systems, it might be a different conversation. So we really do, I want to make sure that whatever you use, it's works for your state and the goals that you have in assessing your system, your child care system, or your greater early childhood comprehensive system. And looking for other questions in the chat, and if you have them, we will compile a frequently asked questions, and that we received today, and then some kind of logistical questions as well. I think that we are at time for the portion of the webinar, and I think in the spirit of springtime, and we're in a season of growth, and we're seeing things budding, and hopefully you're seeing blooms where you are in some pretty colors. And I want to tell you a story that our dear friend Walter Gilliam told me once. He said once that he had a conversation with a peach farmer he knows, and he asked that peach farmer to think about the 3 stages in a peach tree's life: the time between when it is a seed and when it begins to bud, the time between the budding seed and the growing tree, and the time between the growing tree and the first fruit. And I know if you know farmers, they may have different responses to each of these. And Dr. Gilliam asked the farmer, if you could have optimal weather for one of those 3 stages, the weather for the other 2 stages left totally to chance, which stage would you choose the ideal weather for? And without missing a beat, this particular peach farmer said the first one, because all of the potential that is in that tree is in that seed. And I think that the work that you're doing is so parallel to this story, because the systems that you're creating for the infants and toddlers that receive the care from the services and programs that you offer in your states and territories, your system is really that seed that plants the potential of the quality and access to programs and services that your babies and your toddlers and your families have in your state and territory. And so we thank you for creating the great weather conditions, the best weather conditions you can, for being that seed, and for being baby heroes every day. And we thank you for your time on this webinar, and we look forward to hearing from you with further questions, and just continue to do the great work that you're doing for babies and toddlers and their families and the workforce that supports them. And with that, we'll sign off and have a great day, everyone.